Welcome to a lecture on Evil, a poem by Dinesh Dadhichi, prescribed in the subject of English as per the syllabus of BA third semester of Bhagat Phool Singh Mahila Vishwavidyalaya, Khanpur, and recorded for the Department of Higher Education under the aegis of Director General Higher Education, Haryana. Dear students, this lecture will assist you in understanding and attempting a critical appreciation of the poem entitled Evil. I am Dr. Dinesh Dadhichi, a retired professor and chairman, Department of English, Kurukshetra University, Kurukshetra. Here you can meet your poet, Dinesh Dadhichi, and just a few things about this poet. Dr. Dinesh Dadhichi is a former professor and chairperson, Department of English, Kurukshetra University, Kurukshetra, Haryana. He has to his credit 14 books of different genres in English and Hindi. He is known as a creative writer and a translator. Let's first read the text of the poem. The title of the poem is Evil, written by Dr. Dinesh Dadhichi. To the best of our knowledge and belief, it is present, pervading the pores of society. We hereby proclaim that we plan to annihilate it, every part and every bit. We shout from podia, from housetops, it struts and strides and never stops. To slaughter it, we set out with pomp and glitter. It simply smiles and has no jolt or jitter. Often we have seen it ensconced in the chair, sitting cozily across the table. But before we can touch it, it is already flowing in our bloodstream. We have seen it snugly perched on the hand that brandishes the sword against it. The arrows aimed at it find their way into the very core of our being. Tired and vanquished, we solemnly reiterate, to the best of our knowledge and belief, it is present, pervading the pores of the universe. So there are certain words that have been used in the text of the poem, which may be somewhat difficult for some of you. Let's take a look at these words, and I'll give you the meanings of the difficult words. For example, there is a word pervade. Pervade means to be in every part of something, to spread through. And then there is this word annihilate. Annihilate means to destroy or reduce to nothing. Podia. Podia means platforms. Strut, walk stiffly or proudly. Stride, to walk with long steps. Slaughter, to kill in a brutal way. Jitter, it's a state of nervousness. Ensconced means settled comfortably. Snugly means cozily or comfortably. Perched means sitting and maintaining balance. Brandish means to move or swing a weapon. Vanquished means defeated. So now that we have gone through the poem and understood the meanings of different words used in the poem, let us move on to a critical appreciation of the poem. Any critical appreciation includes two parts. They are called, you can call them the what and the how. The what concerns the matter of the poem or any text, and how is concerned with the manner. So the matter and the manner. Let us consider first what the poem is about. Later we shall discuss how the poet says what he wants to say. Look at the title. The poem is clearly about evil because that is the title of the poem. But what does the poet want to say about evil? In general, we can say, after reading the poem, that the broad theme of the poem is the wrong way in which we human beings tackle evil. So this is what the poem says. We can sum up the underlying idea of the poem by noting what happens when we decide to destroy the evil. We all feel that evil is something bad for the world, and we frequently underestimate the power of the evil that we set out to fight against. With all good intentions, we try to fight against it and we try to destroy it. But why is it that finally we fail in our attempts? Why are we finally defeated? That is in fact, this overconfidence when we begin to fight against evil, and lack of proper understanding of the nature of evil is the surest way to defeat and failure in any such endeavor. Finally, we forget that there may be germs of evil inside us also. The poem has this idea too. Now, on the whole, the poem concerns our concern about evil. Everybody says we should do something to destroy the evil. In fact, most of the great men and women have been trying to do that, so that the world may become a better place to live in. With this idea that the evil has to be destroyed, we prepare to fight against it. But this preparation is defective. There is something wrong with this preparation. It proves to be a tough fight because we have not clearly understood the nature of evil, and our enthusiasm proves to be futile or useless. Finally, we feel defeated by the force of evil, and we acknowledge its omnipresence, that it is present everywhere, as the poem says. What is the structure of the poem? You will notice that the poem is divided into 4 parts, and on the page it appears, these 4 parts appear with certain gaps between them. So there are 4, in fact the 4 ideas are there, and the overall idea of the poem has been expressed through these 4 steps. The first part can be called introduction. We are aware of the pervasive presence of evil in our society. That is what the first part says, in simple words. In the second part, when we have understood that evil is pervasive, it is everywhere, we prepare very ostentatiously to destroy evil. In fact, there is a lot of pomp and glitter, as the poem says. So we are trying to show a kind of over enthusiasm about fighting against the evil. And then in the third part, the war against evil starts. We realize gradually that this is a Herculean task and not so easy as we had regarded it to be. In the conclusion, the poem makes it clear that we have to accept defeat finally. So the poem expresses a serious idea about the nature of evil, and also tries to explain why we are defeated in our fight against evil. Now, we have discussed the subject matter of the poem. We know a lot about the content of the poem, but how is this matter presented by the poet? Let us go into details. There are several aspects of the way in which the poet presents his ideas, and when we consider this poem for critical appreciation, we must take into account all these aspects. I am going to talk about them one by one. We have already talked about the structure of the poem. We must understand the different steps that have to be taken in order to arrive at the conclusion. The next point that we must consider is the choice of words made by the poet. His choice of words shows that the poet has deliberately chosen pompous, grandiloquent words and expressions, and he is not using a conversational style or colloquial style. Simple everyday words are not used there. There is a kind of ostentation about the choice of words. So we will have to answer the question why this kind of diction has been used. In fact, this type of choice of words reinforces the effect of anticlimax that we find at the end, because this war is going to end in our defeat. So there is a contrast between the end and the preparation that is made for the war. After diction, let us consider the form of the poem. You know, many of the poems are in iambic pentameter, some are in blank verse. This poem is in free verse. And in general, it follows the rhythms of English prose, because when you read the lines, you feel as if you were reading sentences in prose. However, in the first two parts, rhyming has been employed. You will notice that, for example, it, bit, housetops, stops, glitter, jitter. But this rhyming has been used only in the first two stanzas. It creates the effect of verse. Otherwise, it is free verse. In the remaining two parts, some other devices have been used, and there is no dependence on rhyming. And the poet seems to have done it deliberately. The next aspect of the style of the poem that needs to be considered is the use of repetition and alliteration. You must have noticed that the first sentence of the poem has been repeated at the end of the poem. Let us ask the question, why? The first sentence, when it is repeated at the end, in fact tries to reinforce and to join the beginning with the end. We have gone full circle. A war has been prepared for, it has been fought, and we are defeated, so the circle is complete. And that effect is reinforced with the help of this repetition. But you must have also noticed that there is a significant variation. What is that variation? In the beginning, we are talking about the evil in society, and at the end we are talking about evil in the whole universe. It is seen to be extremely powerful and omnipresent, not in the society but also omnipresent in the whole universe. That is what we arrive at. In addition to this repetition of a sentence, there is another kind of repetition, and this is frequent repetition of consonant sounds. The choice of words seems to have been guided by this consideration, and this repetition of consonant sounds, as you know, is called alliteration. You can find the examples of alliteration in the text of the poem. For example, look at this. It struts and strides and never stops. To slaughter it we set out. It simply smiles. Jolt or jitter, So repetition of s sound and j sound, these are the examples. So the poet has deliberately used alliteration to bring about a kind of impact, the influence, the effect of poem, of a verse. Now, let us consider the style of the poem. There is a set phrasing. The poem starts with a set of words that we have been talking about, words and phrases. Actually, to the best of our knowledge and belief, is a phrase that is employed in affidavits and court documents. It's a set phrase for these legal documents. It does not warrant the absolute truth of the statement, but qualifies it. So what we say in the beginning of the poem is only tentatively considered to be true according to the knowledge and belief, our knowledge and belief. But both these can be limited. Our knowledge is limited, our belief can be a wrong kind of belief. So there is no claim of an absolute truth in this statement, and in legal documents it is commonly used. Now, however, we must understand that any statement which starts with these words, to the best of our knowledge of belief, knowledge and belief, it may be reasonably fair and truthful. Now, the device that has been used here in this poem can be called transposition. It is actually an element of what is generally called intertextuality. Intertextuality can be there in many different forms. In this case, it means transposition of a set of phrases from one context to another. A phrase that was used that is generally used in legal documents is being used in this poem, okay, in a different context altogether. The associations that readers have, already established associations are there with the original context. They make the beginning interesting. As you start reading the poem, you get interested in it because this is a phrase that you are familiar with. Familiarity is an additional advantage. You have started reading the poem, you get interested in it, and you go ahead. Then there is repetition with variation, as we have already discussed. The initial sentence repeated at the end, but the last word has been changed. So repetition with variation is there. Initially, evil appears only in the society, so it seems to be manageable. We can always bring about changes in our society. At the end, we realize that it is a mysterious force, and so it pervades the whole universe. We find it highly unmanageable. The overall tone of the poem also needs to be considered. We notice that it is a very formal kind of tone, and it is formal rather than colloquial. The poet is not talking in a normal way. Why does the poet do this? The use of the formal tone implies that there is an element of satire regarding the arrogant and pompous proclamations that we make from the housetops, the kind of over-enthusiasm that we show. This tone helps in building up the enormity of the crusade or war, only to deflate it in the last part. When we are tired, we are vanquished, we are defeated. What kind of images have been used in the poem? You cannot fail to notice that the imagery is largely that of chivalrous knights brandishing swords and of warriors using bow and arrow against a very powerful enemy. So the imagery is that of traditional war with the help of swords and arrows. That is the kind of image that the poet tries to evoke in our minds. Now these images highlight actually the hollowness of the whole enterprise of totally destroying the evil. by using such high sounding words about the war, the poet seeks to undermine the enterprise itself. There is also an image of chair and table. And chair and table, as you can understand, they indicate positions of power, domination, rule and authority. Everyone can easily perceive evil in authority, in figures of power. But everyone fails to notice that the germs of evil may also be present not only outside but also inside us. Part of our own nature may be evil. We may in a certain way be subscribing to the same evil which we are externally, outwardly fighting against. So all these images are meant to highlight, reinforce, strengthen the message that the poet wants to give. Apart from all these things, there is an element of irony also in the expression. What do we understand by irony? Irony signifies an unusual or unexpected situation that seems strange or amusing to us. It consists of a kind of gap. What is expected in a situation sometimes differs radically from what is actually the case. When this happens, we say that there is an element of irony in it. This gap can be between what is expected and what actually is the case. This gap can be between what is being said and what is meant, and this gap can also be what you are expecting will happen and what actually later on happens. So there are different kinds of irony. Evil in this poem is seen perched on the hand holding the sword which is expected to fight against it. Now that is the element of irony here. The sword is meant to fight against the evil, and evil itself is sitting on the hand of the person wielding the sword. And arrows of the warriors, they are targeting the evil, but finally they reach the core of our own being. Both these are examples of irony used by the poet in this poem. Here is a wrap-up. We can conclude by saying that the poet has used several rhetorical and poetic devices in this brilliant poem to comment on a universal concern. Evil is that universal concern. The poem successfully achieves the effect it seeks to create, because the poet's aim was to highlight the nature of evil, the nature of our understanding about the evil, and the weaknesses in our understanding of the evil, how we begin to fight a battle against evil in order to destroy it completely, but why we finally fail. That has been hinted at in the poem, because evil is generally perceived to be something that is outside us, that is external, and we keep fighting what is outside us. Actually, evil may be present in our own nature. It may be inside us, something which we fail to notice, and that is perhaps the reason we do not fight with evil within ourselves. We keep fighting against it outside, and that is why our attempts fail. Dear students, here is a list of some questions that you may attempt. These are short questions. The first question is, what does the poet say about the problem of evil? This is a general question, and you can talk about the theme of the poem. Secondly, what images does the poet employ to describe our fight against evil? Then you may be asked to give examples of the use of alliteration in the poem. I have already given these examples to you, and it should not be very difficult to find certain consonant sounds being repeated for a certain kind of effect. The fourth question is, write a brief note on the style and tone of the poem. In fact, all these topics have been discussed in my lecture. And the last question is, write a note on the element of irony in the poem. So when you write a note on the element of irony, you are also expected to give examples to prove your point and also to define what irony is. Dear students, now that we have discussed the poem in details, let us recite the poem once again. Evil. To the best of our knowledge and belief, it is present, pervading the pores of society. We hereby proclaim that we plan to annihilate it, every part and every bit. We shout from podia, from housetops, it struts and strides and never stops. To slaughter it, we set out with pomp and glitter. It simply smiles and has no jolt or jitter. We shout from podia, from housetops. It struts and strides and never stops. To slaughter it, we set out with pomp and glitter. It simply smiles and has no jolt or jitter. Often we have seen it ensconced in the chair, sitting cozily across the table. But before we can touch it, it is already flowing in our bloodstream. We have seen it snugly perched on the hand that brandishes the sword against it. The arrows aimed at it find their way into the very core of our being. Tired and vanquished, we solemnly reiterate, to the best of our knowledge and belief, it is present, pervading the pores of the universe. Thank you, dear students. Thanks, dear students. I am the author of the poem, the poet, and also the presenter of this lecture. You can note down the email ID given here at the end.